Hello, I'm Graham Jones, an accredited lecturer for the Art Society and also a former Senior Director of Music of the Household Division, where I was responsible for the delivery of all state ceremonial music on behalf of the British Army, the nation and indeed the monarch. Now you may be asking, why is a former Senior Director of Music of the Household Division lecturing on the music of the Caribbean? Well, once you realise that the Caribbean islands, some of them were British colonies, and that those British colonies had armies, and the armies were built on a British model. That's Jamaica, Barbados and Bermuda. And each of those regiments and those armies had military bands. And they trained their musicians and their directors of music at the Royal Military School of Music at Nella Hall, just outside of London. Whilst I was there studying to be a director of music, I also had some colleagues from the Caribbean who were also there studying. And we had the opportunity to discuss each other's cultures, each other's music, and learn from one another. I really enjoyed learning about the Caribbean culture and its music. So I decided to do a little bit more research. So here we have it, and I'm not going to play the trombone that's in the picture. So please sit back and enjoy my lecture, The Music of the Caribbean. In 1492, Columbus lands in what is now the Bahamas. Though Italian, his expeditions were sponsored by the Catholic monarchs of Spain. On landing, he claims what he thought was the West Indies for Spain. However, he landed in what is now, as we know it, the Americas, the Caribbean. Both Portuguese and Spanish ships began claiming territories in Central and Southern Africa. These colonies brought in gold, and very quickly other European powers, especially England, the Netherlands and France, hoped to establish profitable colonies of their own. Imperial rivalries made the Caribbean a contested area during European wars for centuries to come. The development of agriculture in the Caribbean required a large workforce of manual labourers, which the Europeans found by taking advantage of the slave trade in Africa. The Atlantic slave trade brought African slaves to British, Dutch, French, Portuguese and Spanish colonies in the Americas, including the Caribbean. Slaves were brought to the Caribbean from the early 16th century until the end of the 19th century. The majority of slaves were brought into the Caribbean colonies between 1701 and 1810. They also brought with them their musical traditions. Would you believe, at the height of slavery in the Caribbean, there were around 5 million slaves in the Caribbean, of which over 2.5 million slaves were in the British colonies. The fusion of colonial and African music and dance created a unique style in the Caribbean. The coupling of the music of different regions of West Africa and the influencing of different European countries, India and indigenous music, has resulted in many unique styles and traditions of music across the whole of the Caribbean. This island-specific culture also forms the music of the Caribbean. Every island has its distinct musical styles, all inspired to one degree or another by the music brought over from West Africa. This, combined with the musical influences of the various colonial powers, created a melting pot, a fusion if you wish, of musical genres. As such, most Caribbean music, however unique to its own island culture, includes elements of African and colonial music. Heavy use of percussion instruments, complex rhythmic patterns and call and response vocals. That said, it's important to recognise the musical styles unique to each island. In many cases, the difference between one style and another comes down to the rhythms utilised in each country's music. There is also a different rhythm for every single island. Let's take a look at some of the traditional music found on different islands, starting with Dominica and its unique Jingping band, which supports local traditional dance groups. Drums were banned until emancipation by the Barbados Slave Code Act of 1675 because plantation owners saw them as a symbol of power which could incite unrest and even riots. It wasn't until after emancipation that Jingping bands really came into their own. These Jingping bands have 4 players. Firstly, we have the taboo or drum, which it forms the heartbeat of the band, which was brought to Dominica by the French settlers who came from the Basque region of France. The taboo is sometimes known on Dominica as taboo basque. The player plays rhythms with his hands on both sides of the taboo. It's quite interesting to see how he does that. Next we have the boom boom, which is the base or lower end of the band, made out of forestry or lengths of bamboo. However, it's nothing like the sound of a didgeridoo. Different pitches can be produced by blowing into the playing end of the instrument, and it's really a sort of syncopated bass pulse, a relentless bass pulse. The gouache or scraper comes from Native American roots and provides the treble or high end of the Jingping band. It's enclosed tin cylinder with beads or small pebbles inside which can be shaped. The gouache is played with a scraper made with 3 metal wires attached to a wooden handle. Basically, the player scrapes and shakes at the same time the gouache to create its unique, incredible sound. Finally, we have the accordion, which originated in Austria, Germany and Italy and came to Dominica via France. The accordion is the only instrument which provides both the melody and harmonic structure of the Jingping band. Additionally, the musicians use their feet to tap out sort of beats, bass beats, similar to today's kick drum that you could find in a pop band. Put it all together and it's quite a unique sound. Jingping bands generally accompany traditional dances of Dominica, which is heavily influenced by 19th century French dance such as the quadrille, waltz and les lances, to name but a few. The French brought European dancers to the islands so that they could have some sophisticated evenings. These would have been danced in the plantation owners' homes, where slaves would have seen these dances performed. Notice how gentle the dance is. Musically, the dance is divided into 2 8-bar repeated patterns with 2 groups of 4 dancers. Wasn't that such a gorgeous, delicate dance? And a big thank you as well to the Quadrille Club for providing that footage for us. Now let's take a look at the quadrille as danced today in Dominica. Notice the music pattern is now a repetitive 4-bar sequence, which becomes nearly hypnotic, especially with the syncopated pulse of the boom boom. Also, the quadrille has now taken on a much more relaxed Caribbean style. However, at the end of the day, it's still very much a quadrille. I'm sure you'll agree, it's quite amazing to see how the fusion of cultures has created this wonderful adaptation of the European quadrille into the Dominican quadrille that you've just witnessed. Now, Kwelby is the native music of the US Virgin Islands, a sort of early calypso, and also the official music of the Virgin Islands. The song of Kwelby music are oral history which immortalises significant events, spreads gossip, and recounts the day-to-day life on the island. This form of music was developed when the Virgin Islands were a Danish colony. The African slaves in the plantations were not at all allowed to play their own indigenous instruments, so they developed a most unique style of singing and response, telling stories from their homeland and life on the plantation. Some very political and risky songs were sung with lots of double meanings. The language used was Creole, which developed by mixing languages together, in this case French and African. The most famous Kwelby singer today is Jamesy, who made his own banjo from a Danish cheese tin and cut and carved the peghead and fingerboard. I would not recommend doing that at home. Here he is playing his wonderful homemade banjo, Jamesy. The music of Kwelby is played by a scratch band, which consists of a steel, which is a triangle, a flute, a drum, kind of bongos, a squash, which is scraped. Today's instruments can also be added to, like a bass guitar, a rhythm guitar, sometimes even, dare I say, a saxophone. When Jamesy was asked about this development, he simply said, "Hey man, the music's travelling." But the most important thing are the stories the words tell in Kwelby music. Here is an excellent example. I'm now going to take you to Barbados for a completely different form of music making, which is known as Landship, which traces back to the 1860s when Moses Wood, a Barbadian who served in the Royal Navy, returned from living in Cardiff and Southampton, and he was influenced by the friendly societies he'd seen in the UK. He decided to form a society in Barbados built around the discipline and comradeship of the Royal Navy. The Landship functions like a working class friendly society, however, with the added bonus of choreographed music and dance. The friendly society provides the members with cash, insurance for illness, maternity, and even death. As its name suggests, it pretends to be a naval ship on land, mimicking the Royal Navy, which could be found anchored in the ports of Barbados. The house where the meetings take place is known as the dock, with sails and insignia flying from the roof. Its members form a ship's crew and a full rank structure and dressing in naval-style uniforms is the order of the day. Women came into the movement in the early 1900s designated as nurses. Each landship was named after British ships such as the Iron Duke, Nelson and Cornwall. The movement expanded in the 1920s until there were 3 fleets of over 60 ships. By the 1930s, that's about 3,000 men and 800 women. For theatre, the crew forms 2 lines and moves together, directed by the captain of the ship performing a series of repeated movements. A ship can't sail without an engine, which is the rhythm and music known in Landship as a tuk band, made up of a bass drum, a snare drum, a flute. Here is Ilf Wilkinson talking about tuk drumming.
The basic fundamentals of playing is on the kettle is with 2 sticks. And we have a gentleman here that we can actually have a look at that briefly. And if you're looking at the 6, the feel of 6 are notes that are played equally with each hand. And then you identify a louder or softer note in order to help you also connect with the rhythm. So a good way of doing that is basically we're going to start with the basics that I've showed you, which is the 2 simple notes for the 6, and it's played right in the center of the drum. So this is up. What you get out of the 6. If you look at it as a raw 2 sticks hitting the drum, this is what it looks like. Any variations you make from here help you to identify the rhythm as a unit. But that's basically having a listen to the 6 without using the drum as Barbadians do, because I want to stress this very carefully, that whilst these drums are played across the world, including the Caribbean, the only persons that plays these drums this way are Barbadians. Hence the name tuk band from a Bajan point of view, however you want to put it. It's a local traditional thing that we have now developed, and it's based upon these simple things. Now going to what we call the chime, so you get the difference in sound. All that's being done here is to move the stick from one location to another. It changes the tone, it gives you that unique Barbadian sound. And you'll find the elderly guys or the more traditional guys will tell you you're playing the kettle and you're playing the chime. The chime would turn out to be the ending of the drum. If you stop playing the chime, you're actually playing the same thing over and over. What identifies the differences in sound is the moving of the stick from one point to the other.
So you can see how incredible the drumming technique is in a tuk band. But also unique is the flute. And the flute is called the Clark flute. It's English and it's made by metal. However, people started to make their own flutes within Barbados, which are absolutely wonderful. So sit back and enjoy somebody from the tuk band.
Down by the cool riverside, some of them turned to the boatman and said, "Oh, oh, me over the side. Oh, me over the side, boatman. Oh, me over the side. Someone out there just is waiting for me, so oar me over the side."
Now, in order for this landship to move from its dock, it needs a couple of things. It needs a head of steam. And the head of steam, of course, is provided by the engine, which is the tuk band. It also needs the crew to be there to steer the ship. The quicker the music, the more head of steam there is, and the steadier the ship is in rough waters. Here's a really good description of how this works.
In the waltz, you would get the song Adam and Eve, which is the real authentic traditional waltz song. Banana, da, da, da. Right, correct. And then as Punko would say, you build up to you're building up to full steam, where you get medium steam or the fascino, you get another traditional song, we call it the Caledonian. Right. So that is one of the traditional songs. And then with the fast tuck now, we have one or two songs. We have a song Burn Cane. Then we have Granum Grong. These are the real traditional songs. And your favorite song that is Suki. Right? That's my favorite.
More recently now, Tuck by Rhythm.
Right. Okay. Right. That was the real traditional tap band song. So yes, there are a couple of traditional songs that we still, incorporate in what we do. I mean, I play a lot of familiar songs of the present time, waltz, brassy, whatever, and tap, but I still make sure, to keep the tradition as part of it.
We can see the incredible effects slavery, colonialism, emancipation and independence has shaped the rich culture of music and dance in the Caribbean. And it's still evolving. As some of the older, more traditional music dies away, new music that still draws on the rich history, heritage and tradition come into being. The population is ever changing, with Chinese and Indians settling in the Caribbean, bringing their music and culture to the rich melting pot that is the music of the Caribbean. I'm going to take you right back to the beginning of my lecture, where I talked about the military bands that can be found in the Caribbean. So I thought I would leave you with the Jamaican Defence Force Band wearing their traditional uniform, which was given to both the Jamaican and Barbados Defence Forces by Her Majesty Queen Victoria. Today, it's only the bands that wear this wonderful uniform. So, playing the most British of party tunes, Post on Gallop, which, by the way, is still played today in every officers' and sergeants' mess across the British Armed Forces. So, here they are. It is the Jamaican Defence Force Band. Thank you for watching.